Hello everybody, so I'm out in the woods. It's springtime and the temperature is perfect today. It's 20 degrees and sunny, but we're not here to talk about the beauty of God's creation, at least not this creation. We're here to talk about anime, because people have been asking for more reviews, and fair enough, I suppose. So the anime we're going to talk about today is The Wise Man's Grandson, or The Magus's Grandson, or The Wise Magus's Grandson. I've seen a number of different translations. They're all pretty similar. If you Google any of the above, you will probably find it. I don't think that'd be much of an issue. And this comes to us in the tradition of the various isekai light web novels that get adapted into a manga and then get their own anime series. I guess the one that started this trend was probably Sword Art Online. I'm not super familiar, but I just recall that being the first one that really got popular acclaim. And then I feel like they just started grabbing whatever other IPs they could find and just mass producing them. And when I say isekai, I'm including things like, well, I include Sword Art Online. Even though it's a video game, it's not exactly another world. I'd include something like Excel World, and You Never Thought There Was a Girl Online. I'm trying to think of what some other ones were. Oh, Shield Hero, obviously. You can almost make a case to a certain extent for Goblin Slayer, since it's obvious they're in a D&D game, but I digress. So it comes in the line of those, and I think because Sword Art Online was so popular, they just, like I said, tried to grab whatever IP they could and make a series out of it. And like many of those, I doubt it's going to get a season 2. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be one of those cases where it takes like 10 years. I find with a lot of these light novel adaptations, they don't get a second season. Even Excel World, which was made by the same guy who did Sword Art Online, doesn't have a second season. So if that doesn't get it, I don't know if this will. Although I think Shield Hero is going to get 3 seasons, and I think that's confirmed at this point. But yeah. So this has a lot of the general tropes you have with light/web novel isekai. I don't really know what the background of the author is, but I'd imagine this is his first or one of his first works. And that's very much reflected in that, because this is kind of isekai distilled down to its purest form, that being extreme male wish fulfillment, which I don't really have a problem with. I don't think there's necessarily really anything wrong with it, and I think at least they do it in this case in like a wholesome way. Kind of a similar thing with Chivalry of a Failed Knight. It's male wish fulfillment, but it's not like degenerate or unwholesome or that kind of thing. It does use ecchi and like fan service, but like not excessively, and not to a disgusting attempt. Like there's a lot of attractively drawn characters, and there's occasionally fan service scenes, but it's not like Kill la Kill, or what was that other one I gave a really bad review to that was just constant fan service? Oh, Code Geass. Although I like Code Geass, but there was so much just insufferable fan service in it. So it's very much that. So the plot of Wise Magus's Grandson is, so the main character is a Japanese salaryman who gets hit by a truck at the beginning, and he wakes up in another world. Now, I guess the twist on this one is he gets reincarnated in the other world as a baby. So he has his full adult intelligence as a baby, and so I guess he just has a lot more time to develop mentally, because even if he's like 20 years old when he dies, by the time the series takes place, he's like 16 or something, so he's 36 years old mentally. But he goes into this other world, and he's found by Merlin and Melinda, who are the two greatest magic users that this world, I think, has ever seen. And they're famous for defeating a bunch of demon-possessed animals or something years and years ago. They used to be married, but now they're divorced, and they obviously bicker like an old married couple. So they find Shin and they decide to adopt him. And so he's raised since birth to be the ultimate magician. And I don't know how much of it is natural talent because he's like a messianic figure. I don't know how much of it is that he was trained by like the greatest magic user in the world. And I don't know how much of it is just, he really hacks it. Like I said, Naofumi hacks the world a bit by being kind of genre savvy. Shin is like super genre savvy. He seems to have a pretty good working knowledge of engineering and like chemistry and stuff, and he uses that together with magic. And he just has, because he's in his previous life he saw a whole bunch of anime and manga, so he has ideas that just other people don't. Also, because he wasn't taught magic wrong, he was taught it by someone who knew what they were doing and knew what they were doing in a very unconventional way. He doesn't have the same restrictions. A common thing in a lot of stories that have magic or wizarding powers, and this is pretty common in Harry Potter fanfics, is sometimes if you're not taught the rules of, a lot of magic is based on belief and will. And to a certain extent, things like wands and incantations and that sort of thing are there to focus your mind consciously or subconsciously. It's almost kind of like a muscle memory to be able to cast a certain spell or do a certain thing magically. And it's not strictly necessary. So like in this, you don't need any of that stuff to cast spells, but most people are trained that way. Shin isn't trained that way because it's not needed, and not having kind of the same concept of conventional spells means he can just do a lot of extra stuff. So he's basically like all-powerful god tier, and like I said, this is very much male wish fulfillment. But is that a bad thing? Because as my friend Serp likes to say, the final red pill is that cliches are good. And as I said, it is very generic in a lot of ways, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it is very wholesome in a lot of ways. So what they more or less figure out is that Shin has invented all these different types of magic, such as like teleportation through portals. And it's kind of funny because in this world, how you do enchantments is I think you have to write what it does onto it. And because he knows Japanese from his previous life, he writes like the enchantments on using Japanese characters, where every character is one word, so he can fit a lot more on. And he just has all this other like crazy stuff. But because he was raised in the woods away from society, he doesn't have any common sense, and that's kind of a big portion of this. So they decide to send him to the Magic Academy with the other noble kids. He's not technically a nobleman, but it's kind of like if you're the grandson of Hercules or something. I mean, you could argue he's a noble because Zeus is his grandfather, but it's not technically like in the kingdom of Sparta or whatever, he'd be a noble, but for all intents and purposes he is. So he goes with the other noble kids. He has kind of a cool relationship with the king. He calls the king Uncle Dis. I forget what his full name is, but he just refers to him very informally. His best friend is the prince, who's like a Chad, named Augustus. He calls him Og or Gus. And very early on, he meets his future fiance, and that's something I really like about this. Is most of the characters in relationships are actually engaged, and they're happy with their engagements. So it's like a tradition among the nobility in this world that you can't date their daughter unless you get engaged to her first, which is pretty based. So he meets Cicely pretty early. Cicely's kind of a sweet girl, kind of goofy. I think they made her a bit too young looking. I don't know if that's the correct term, because she's clearly an adult and she's very well endowed, but they kind of made her very kind of youngish and cute looking, which is a little weird. But he meets her pretty early on and it's love at first sight, and everyone's jealous that he has this really hot girl into him. And eventually, like, you have the traditional, they're both too shy to say it, will they or won't they? And then they like the friends set it up so that they'll get together. And then he asks her to be his girlfriend, and then he goes to the parents and asks for permission to date her, and they're like, you can only date her if you get engaged to her. And he's like, okay, I expected that. I'm going to take responsibility for my GF. And I thought that was pretty sweet. It's also kind of base, to be honest. A lot of the characters, as I said, are engaged. Like Augustus is engaged. And most people are pretty happy about it. So that's kind of weird. But yeah, so he goes to magic school and he's way smarter than everybody else. There's nothing they can teach them. He founds his own magical research society called the Ultimate Magic Research Society. And he takes in like all the other kids, and they all get like trained to be super magicians. And there's this like demons that are being unleashed upon the world. So they become the ultimate magicians, and they're like this elite team that go out and kill demons. There's kind of some interesting stuff because they talk a bit about like the political implications, because the stuff that Shin invents is so revolutionary. If the kingdom he's in decided to weaponize it, they could overrun large portions of the world. Like, instant teleportation via gate is pretty broken. And just his ability to enchant things is extremely overpowered. So they form that group. It's kind of cool because all the different characters specialize in things and they get like nicknames. Like Augustus's, I think it's like lightning god or something, and then Sicily is a healing specialist, so they name her Saint. And I think they call Shin Demon Lord, which he really hates. But like I said, it's pretty generic in a lot of ways. That's not a bad thing. It's very much kind of a male wish fulfillment, but once again, that's not a bad thing. At least the main character is like a really nice guy. And I mean like actually nice guy, not like the cringy nice guy. And he has a GF who loves him, and they're engaged, and it's just very wholesome. And it portrays like the nobility, generally speaking, very positively. Noblesse oblige is a very big part of the series, which once again is something I like. So is it generic? Is it uncreative? Yeah. Does that make it a bad thing? No, I wouldn't say it makes it a bad thing. I'd say it's a good series. It's not as good as like some other things I've reviewed, but it gets one thumb up for me at any rate.